My name is Olivia Hart, a pale stone villa with a blue door that faces a slow river on the edge of Savannah. I bought this house with a down payment of $90,000 and a loan whose monthly bite I know by heart. When the wind comes off the water, the oak by the terrace taps the window like a gentle metronome that keeps time with my breath. Inside, the rooms are neat now because there is no one small to undo them. My daughter, Ellie, died last winter after a long illness, and since then I have learned how grief rearranges a home. It clears the clutter, but it also empties the air. We planned the funeral for a Tuesday. I chose lilies because they smelled like the chapel where I once sang as a girl. I ironed a black dress and tucked a comb in my purse because I could not control anything except my hair. I told myself I would be brave, that I would stand and speak, even if my voice shook. That morning my sister, Grace, called. She said she needed to adjust the timing of her engagement party. She wanted to move it to the same day as Ellie's farewell because, she said, it fit more calendars. She sounded like someone shifting a meeting, not someone stepping onto a grave. I said no. I said the villa was not available. I said I could not host a celebration while choosing hymns for a burial. Grace laughed, a bright tin sound, and told me not to make everything about grief. My parents, Margaret and Thomas, called later and took her side. They said my daughter's death was a trivial matter compared with a new chapter, as if sorrow were a hobby and joy a bill that demanded payment in advance. I stood in my kitchen with the kettle hissing and the deed to my house in my hand, and I understood something I should have known years ago. Love without respect is only noise. That night I walked through Ellie's room and folded the quilt she liked because the stars were stitched too big. I opened her drawer and found the ticket stub from a ferry ride we took to New York the summer before, when the city felt like a dare I was brave enough to keep. I put the stub back and sat on the floor. Somewhere nearby a band was rehearsing, and the rhythm came through the walls, steady as a second heart. Grace always said my villa looked like Europe, and perhaps the river lights do pretend at Paris when the evening turns soft. But it is my house, not a stage, and my grief is not a pause between songs. Daniel, my ex-husband and Ellie's father, called from Denver and asked if I wanted him to fly in. He said he could cover a last-minute ticket. He had £300 left from a consulting job in London. I told him to keep it. This was my line to draw. After we hung up, I printed the deed and set it by the front door. I rehearsed what I would say if anyone arrived with champagne and a grin. Then I opened my laptop and wrote an email to Grace, to our parents, and to her fiancé, Lucas Reed. The villa is not available. Do not come. I will be mourning my child, not pouring drinks. In the morning I drove to a locksmith named Carla and paid $120 to rekey the back door and the gate. I slid the new key onto a ring with Ellie's silver star and felt its small weight settle in my palm. On the way home, I bought coffee and a plain bagel because I needed something I could finish. That night, I walked the terrace and watched the river hold a slice of moon while the oak leaned close like a friend who knows when to be quiet. I switched off the string lights and let the dark do its work. Love is a boundary as much as it is a bond, I told myself. If they tried to cross my door on Tuesday, I would call the police and let the law say what blood would not. And for the first time in months, I slept. By sunrise the next day, the river mist lay low over the water like a soft sheet, and my villa felt steadier because I had a plan. I brewed coffee and set the deed to my house beside the mug, the paper a quiet promise that I was not powerless. I took photos of the pages and emailed copies to myself and to a lawyer I knew by name only, Henry Cole in New York, who had once helped my ex-husband with a contract. I wrote, "I'm Olivia Hart in Savannah, America. My sister plans to hold an engagement party at my home against my wishes. What can I do if they show up?" I attached the deed, my driver's license, and the email where I had said no. I felt like a student turning in proof. I did not expect a quick reply, but within an hour, Henry called. His voice had the calm weight of someone who has seen many storms. He said, "You own the property, Olivia. If anyone arrives and refuses to leave, call the police. Do not argue. Do not touch anyone. Record what you can. If a vendor asks who will pay, tell them there is no contract with you." He asked if I had a neighbor who could witness events. I thought of Mrs. Bennet down the lane and said yes. He charged me $250 for a same-day consult, and I paid it gladly. It felt like buying a better lock for my own spine. Locks, then. I drove back to Carla's shop, the small place with the bell that rings like a toy. Carla has a keen face and a habit of tying her hair with bright ribbon. When I told her the situation, she frowned and said, "We can add a keyed latch to the terrace gate and a new deadbolt to the side door." She printed an invoice for $120 for the work we started yesterday and another for $80 for today. I paid the $200 on my card, plus $10 cash for the tip, because I needed her to know I valued her help. She pressed the new keys into my palm and said, "You deserve quiet in your own home." Back at the villa, I walked through each room with a notepad. I shut Ellie's door and left a small heart on the page where I wrote, "Do not open." In the kitchen, I boxed the champagne flutes my sister loves to borrow and slid them under the sink. I unplugged the terrace lights. I moved the small speaker into my bedroom. My house looked ordinary, but I felt like a stage manager clearing props before a show that must not go on. By noon, an email arrived from my sister. The subject line read, "We'll make it look nice." She wrote, "Don't be dramatic, Liv. People are flying in. You can stay upstairs if you need quiet." My parents chimed in with a second note. "Grace deserves joy. Be reasonable." I stared at the word reasonable until it blurred. I replied, "No one has permission to enter my property for any party. If you come, the police will be called. Please do not come." Then I turned off the laptop and set my phone to Do Not Disturb, except for Daniel's number and 911. In the late afternoon, I walked to Mrs. Bennet's porch. She wore a navy sweater and the sort of watch that ticks loud in a quiet room. I told her what might happen. She squeezed my hand and said, "I'll keep an eye out. I have Officer Elena Ruiz's card from when my mailbox was hit last year." We exchanged numbers. It felt good to know another woman would stand with me. I made a simple dinner, pasta with butter and salt, and ate it at the small table by the window. I counted my funds like someone checking tools. My salary, the $1,200 in my emergency account, the £50 Daniel once sent from London that I keep tucked in a book, not to spend, but to remind myself that people do try sometimes. After I washed the dish, I set two things by the door, the deed and a small notebook. On the first page I wrote, "If they arrive, breathe, record, call." Night came slow, the oak tracing patient shadows across the terrace. I locked the new lock and stood there for a breath. I am Olivia Hart of Savannah, America. This is my house. My grief is not trivial. And if my sister turns joy into a weapon, I will meet it with a key, a page of paper, and the law. By late afternoon, the sky over Savannah turned the color of old pewter, and the river moved like a slow thought beyond my terrace. I swept the entry, not because it needed it, but because I needed a task that sounded like calm. The deed sat on the console table beside my notebook. My phone was charged, the camera ready, Henry Cole's advice underlined in blue ink. Do not argue. Do not touch. Record. Call. I checked the new latch Carla installed on the gate and pressed my hand to the cool metal, as if the key itself could steady me. Mrs. Bennet texted from down the lane. "I'm on my porch. I see the road." I replied with a heart and turned off the string lights that made the terrace look like a postcard from Europe. At 5:30, the first van rolled in, tires whispering on gravel. A catering truck followed, then a small bus with tinted windows. Grace stepped out in white satin, her hair piled high, a bouquet already in her hands. My parents came behind her, Margaret smoothing her jacket, Thomas adjusting his cuff, as if the whole scene were a boardroom. Lucas Reed carried 2 boxes of champagne flutes and grinned like he had won a prize. "We'll keep it tasteful," he said, as if taste were the point. He offered an envelope, the corner open so I could see cash $3,000 in crisp stacks. "Security deposit," he added. I didn't touch it. "This is my home," I said. "You do not have permission to be here. There is no party tonight." My voice sounded level, the way a floor sounds when it will hold. Grace glanced past me, measuring the terrace like square footage, then flicked her eyes back. "You don't have to come down," she said. "Stay upstairs, Olivia. We'll keep it quiet." I felt something inside me fold and lock. "No," I said. "Leave now." The band began to unload speakers. The caterers lined silver trays on a folding table. Someone tested a microphone, and a low hum filled the air, a false heartbeat. I stepped back into the foyer, started my phone camera, and dialed. "This is Olivia Hart at the River Road Villa," I told the dispatcher. "I own the property. My sister and several vendors are here against my consent. I've asked them to leave. They refuse." The dispatcher asked for my address, my name, and if anyone was violent. "No," I said, looking at Grace's smile. "But they are persistent." When I walked back outside, my parents were waiting at the gate. Margaret brushed invisible lint from my shoulder, a gesture so rehearsed my skin stiffened under it. "Be reasonable," she said. "Your sister's happiness is not an attack." Thomas nodded toward the house. "We raised you here," he lied. "I bought this villa myself. You owe the family some grace." I thought of Ellie's quiet room, of the ferry ticket tucked in a drawer, of the £50 Daniel once sent from London that I keep as a reminder that effort counts. "I owe my daughter peace," I said. 2 patrol cars rounded the bend, blue lights soft in the gray evening. Officer Jordan Brooks stepped out first, tall and careful, followed by Officer Elena Ruiz, whom Mrs. Bennett had mentioned. Brooks greeted me by name, asked to see identification and the deed. I handed over both, my hands steady. Ruiz walked to Grace and Lucas. I heard her say, "This is private property. The owner has asked you to leave." Grace tossed her bouquet from hand to hand like a baton and said, "She's my sister." Ruiz's voice stayed even. "That is not a legal right of entry." Brooks returned my papers and faced my parents. "Sir, ma'am, you need to instruct your guests and vendors to pack up." Lucas tried again with the envelope, offering it to the officer now. Brooks didn't look at it. "We're not here to negotiate fees," he said. "We're here to enforce trespass law." My mother's mouth thinned. "She's making grief into theater," she said. Officer Ruiz answered, "Tonight is not a show." For a long minute, nobody moved. Then the band started reloading their cases. The caterers snapped shut the trays. A server, young, hair in a neat bun, caught my eye and gave a small nod, as if to say she understood more than the menu. Mrs. Bennett hovered at the edge of the lane, a witness in a navy sweater, and I felt less alone. Grace finally lowered her bouquet. "You've ruined it," she said, not to me, but into the evening, as if the river had ears. Lucas muttered something about refunds. My father looked at the officers and said, "We'll go." And they did, the vans reversing carefully, the small bus turning slow, the gossip of gravel fading until only the oak and the river were speaking again. When the last tail light disappeared, Officer Brooks asked if I wanted to file a formal report. "Yes," I said. He took notes, asked calm questions, and wrote down the total I'd seen in the envelope, $3,000, because details matter. Officer Ruiz gave me her card. "Call if anyone returns," she said. I thanked them both and watched the patrol cars roll away. The terrace lay dark and unbroken. I locked the gate, slid the key onto Ellie's silver star, and stood under the first clean quiet of the night. My house, my law, my child's peace. I breathed, long and even, and for once the air did not burn. The morning after the non-party, Savannah woke clean and pale, and my villa finally sounded like itself. The river spoke in its slow language. The oak traced quiet shadows over the terrace. I brewed coffee and set 2 things on the table, the deed and the police report number Officer Jordan Brooks had written in neat block letters. I was not gloating. I was confirming. Paper can be a kind of mercy when people insist on forgetting what you've said. I wrote 3 emails before the sun cleared the live oaks. The first went to the caterer. "None of this is your fault," I told Marina, whose staff had packed in silence when the officer spoke. I paid a $250 cancellation fee and added a $100 tip for the servers, because I remembered the girl with the neat bun who met my eyes and nodded. Money can't fix a wound, but it can close a small cut. The second email went to my lawyer, Henry Cole, in New York. I thanked him for the quick counsel and settled the invoice, $250, without a quibble. The third email went to Grace. I wrote, "The police report number is attached. Please do not contact me for a while. No poetry, only facts." By noon, my parents called. I let it ring. Their message was a familiar duet. "You didn't have to make a scene. Your sister was embarrassed. Family should be reasonable." The word reasonable scraped like sand in a shoe. I saved the voicemail and filed it with the others, a tidy archive of what I would no longer carry. When Grace finally wrote, her message was a single sentence: "You've ruined the story I wanted." I almost replied, almost said that she had ruined the story I needed, but silence sometimes protects better than a lock. I cleaned for an hour, though the house was already neat. I boxed the spare champagne flutes and slid them into the pantry behind the flower. I folded Ellie's quilt again, the stars too large and cheerful for a quiet room. I opened the window in her room and let the river's cool breath move the curtains. I did what I had to. I told the air. I kept us safe. There was no answer, only the soft rasp of leaves and, somewhere downriver, a boat engine trawling past like a slow thought. In the afternoon, I did a small but stubborn thing. I called a shelter for mothers in America who were facing eviction and asked for a name. They gave me a woman in Ohio who was $600 short on rent after a layoff. I wired the money and wrote for Ellie in the memo. It wasn't a monument. It was a light the size of my palm. That night, Daniel called from Denver. He said, "Proud of you." His voice had the careful quiet people use around fresh grief. I told him about the shelter and the boat and the way the officers' blue lights looked gentle in the gray dusk. He said, "Come see the mountains sometime." I said, "Maybe." We both knew maybe could hold a world. A week later, I bought a train ticket to New York, $180 round trip, coach, and packed light, jeans, a black sweater, a book, and Ellie's silver star with my keys. The train slid up the coast, the river unwinding into wide salt and then into the bright rattle of city tracks. In Manhattan, I walked until the buildings felt like a cathedral with no sermon. I visited a small museum and stood too long in front of a painting of a single blue square, the color of the river when rain is coming. On the third day, I crossed a bridge and let the wind push tears out of my eyes without asking what they were for. New York did not demand a mood. It made room for one. When I came home, the villa met me like a steady friend. The oak was still there. The terrace lights were still off. The locks turned in the same sure arc. I placed the keys on the console next to the deed and the card officer Elena Ruiz had given me. Then I wrote 2 letters by hand. The first went to Grace. "When you are ready to speak with care, I will listen. Not before." The second went to myself. "You are allowed to guard your peace. People say blood is everything, but I have learned that water teaches a truer lesson. It moves forward. It makes its own path. It does not apologize for the banks it chooses. I am Olivia Hart of Savannah, America. I own a pale stone villa with a blue door and a river that understands persistence. I could not save my daughter's life, but I saved her quiet, and then I saved my own. That is the story I am keeping. That is the key I carry."